Hey everyone, Saul here, and welcome to my new educational series, which is part of my Ghost in the Gaslight art project. I like to write and illustrate my own ghost stories. Have started this new series, which is more educational about creating things. And this is the first episode. I'm calling it The Spirit of Learning, Ghost in the Gaslight, Spirit of Learning. See, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell so that whenever I make more videos about how to paint or how to ink, how to pick out the right pen, or you will get that video. So don't forget. Thank you everyone for the support on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Patreon. You guys have just been the best. You have contributed to my growth as an artist, and I am absolutely grateful for each and every one of you. So we're going to do an ink drawing. We're going to do a tree, specifically an oak tree. So I'm going to go back in time to when there was no drawing on this page. And I'm going to stay in the workshop, so it's not going to upset the, space-time, whatever. And I will have no memory of it. So I'm going to be kind of coming up with it. And this is a reference of a picture that I took. I was in one of my favorite cemeteries actually recently. And this tree was just magical. It was just this mossy oak tree, and I just had to capture it for a sketch. It's something I do like to do, and I do like to draw trees from time to time. In case you're wondering, and people do ask what kind of sketchbooks I recommend, this is actually a special sketchbook. As you can see, it's made for mixed media, so you can draw, you can paint, it can take a lot. And I've really tested it. It's wonderful paper. It's from a company called Artist Loft, which I believe is the arts and crafts store Michael's own brand, Artist Loft. It actually makes some good paints too. One of the things I love about this paper, it's not too toothy. It's thick, which is great for watercolor, but it's also really smooth, so I don't feel the nib of the pen catching on it, which is that is what you want. You get a nice smooth drag of the nib across the paper. So speaking of nibs, this is what might be called a pumpkin head nib, and this is my go-to. I have used this pretty much the whole time. I've experimented with others, but I love this one because it holds a lot in the reservoir, and you just go. Fits in here, and this is not called a pen, it's called a holder. So this is the nib holder. The whole thing, you could say, is maybe a fountain pen, but this nib holder, this particular one, it is so elegant. I love it. As you can see, I have used so much out of this, and it's got some red badge of courage or two or three on it. But I love this piece. This is from a company called Ink Slinger Pens. And then for my ink, I use kind of a typical black from Dr. Martens, and I love it. I've always used it. I've gotten pretty comfortable with the size of the bottle, at least at this point. And then the last thing is a rag. You definitely want to use a rag so that the ink that is building up in this pool, this reservoir here, doesn't coagulate, harden, stops the flow of the ink. So you want to be wiping that. You get the hang of it. After a while, it becomes like dotting an I or crossing a T. It's great. Without any further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to be starting with a light pencil sketch. And this is going to be light because I'm working with reference. Because I have a photograph, the one you saw earlier, that pretty photo, I know more or less where all the values, light and dark, are going to be for me. So I don't need to plan as much with the pencil. You may feel you want to for a while. I think the pencil is great. It allows you to make mistakes. It's much more forgiving than ink is. But with this, I'm just going light. I am trusting that if I get a basic foundation of what's going to be on the paper, then I can go in with the ink. That's the only purpose of this. So I'm doing what I would call scouting around. I'm trying to get all over the page and just get a sense of the scope, the top to bottom of the tree that I want. And I'll be putting some branches here and there, but there's going to be a lot of branches that just find their way on in the ink stage. But this is just so that I have the peace of mind of, the placement of that trunk, for instance, where it is on the ground. Because it's in a cemetery, I'm going to add that headstone. And that's pretty much all I need to do. And I apologize, this is a time lapse. I really had a limited amount of time that I was allowed to make for the video. So if there's any way I can do an hour-long version of this, in this case, this piece took me about 2 hours, then I will absolutely do that. But for now, I wanted to give you all this tutorial. It's a starting place. As you can see, I'm going with the ink. Now, you see the lines are broken up, and this is to keep it loose. And I'm doing more scouting. You can see I've already been all over the page. And I'm not focusing on one place and getting all the shadows down. You see that? When I start putting in some shadows, I listen to my instincts, which are try to put that same amount of shadows all over the tree. And then I'm getting a sense of it. I'm getting a sense of light and dark. I can plan ahead. And that's very important. Because with ink, it's one point of no return after another. It can be pretty unforgiving if you put something and you didn't want to put it there. So it's important that you scout, you get information. If you focus on one branch and you just make it as dark or as textured as it needs to be, and then you go to the next one, and then you go to the next one, you're not really getting a sense of the whole, and you're only doing parts. And one of the problems you can run into is you might see a place that really needed light, really needed to stay with negative space so that the lighter portion would make the darker portion pop. But because that one was made too dark early on, because you were not looking at the whole, you were only looking at the parts, you've missed that opportunity. And that is always a sad moment in an ink drawing when it happens, because you just have a regret whenever you see it. And as you can see, because I've been fast and loose with like shading here and there, now other places are starting to call. Like for instance, this branch here, this bough in the front is very dark and it's very much in the foreground. So I wanted to stand out from the others. And because I've gotten that dark, it's going to now inform other places that could be dark. And be mindful of when you add that first shadow, because the whole piece now has to follow that as its standard. So be very careful and judicious when you pick that moment to be. When you're scouting around and before you go dark, it's good to get a sense of everything. Get the sense of the texture, get the sense of the size or the weight. And as you can see, as I'm going darker, I'm getting more into the cross-hatching. I'm feeling good and confident now to do that. And that'll be its own video about hatching and cross-hatching. The cross-hatching is just such a wonderful tool with inking. And sometimes you can make a mistake and you can just cover it up with cross-hatching. I've done that many times, and it's actually wound up being better than I could have planned. Sometimes mistakes just take you places. I would say don't give up on a drawing, because sometimes you can problem solve and the mistake will take you somewhere that you couldn't intellectualize without having completely flubbed that. Makes it more human. Anyways, as you can see, it's getting darker in places and the tree is starting to occupy a more three-dimensional plane a little apart from the page. And I don't find that I need to, sometimes with a piece like this, I don't necessarily need to wipe the pen as often, because I'm really just playing around and I want a lot of kind of dark values. If I was really playing with a lot of light, I would probably be wiping the pen like crazy. One of the things I love with trees is they have so many different textures, so it lends itself well to playing with different techniques. This tree has bark and moss, and then there's the texture that the shadows bring out, so I can try different things. And now we're going to the ground. This is one of my favorite little things to do, particularly when you're doing a tree and you just can really improvise and just make kind of black lines that just stick in every direction. And it just suggests the ground, and it suggests the shade that the tree is providing. It does a lot of stuff. Rarely on something like this do I need to draw much in the ground, like ahead of time with a pencil. I can just go at it with ink. I grew up with a lot of oak trees around me, and they're just fantastical in the way that their branches are twisting, and they just become so huge and expansive. And they have these tiny leaves, and they just have so many, and it's a very dry tree. It grows in a lot of dry climates, and so these leaves are tiny, and there's so many of them, and they have this kind of swarming effect. So I was experimenting with ways that I could make the leaves of an oak tree, and I wanted to make them dark to give that kind of swarming effect rather than maybe like tufts of leaves that are attracting light, which would be a different type of thing and no doubt will be in a different video. But for this one, the technique was to swarm the leaves around the tree. And sometimes when you're doing these drawings, it's just great to experiment like that. With inking, it can be precarious. This was kind of a precarious experiment. I was like, are these leaves going to work? Are these going to give the suggestion of a three-dimensional object in space? And it really, then there was a point, I originally wasn't even going to put other trees in the background, and then I just felt it needed it. And sometimes a piece just starts asking for something you didn't plan. You want to be careful when you're doing ink how much you listen to the voices. But, when you do a lot of ink, then you can just improvise. If I was starting out, I probably wouldn't even... I don't know that I would have done those trees in the background, and I don't know if I would have done the leaves as an experiment without doing a bit of pencil planning before that. And then because this was in a cemetery, I went and took some artistic license and added a few more gravestones, and then I had a beautiful haunted oak tree stretching out in every direction in a beautiful cemetery. One of the things I love about working with trees is you'll just keep getting better every time. And you do one, maybe it didn't go your way in some places, maybe you're proud of some things, but you'll be surprised how much learning you take with you on the next one. Plus, you spend time with trees, you get to go outdoors. It's a beautiful thing. And that was episode 1 of The Spirit of Learning. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something or a little something. And I enjoyed having you here. Like I said, this means a lot to me to be able to contribute this, stuff that goes on in my head, or the way I learn things, the way I see things, to you, and hopefully you find something helpful to do with it. And I will see you on the next one. Again, please like this video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. All right, I'll see you on the next one.